Welcome to the Thriving Farmer Podcast. I'm your host, Michael Kilpatrick. Our mission is to inspire, educate, and celebrate sustainable farming. We believe that you can build a profitable, sustainable farm that gives you true farm freedom. Join us as we talk to farmers, innovators, educators, and entrepreneurs to glean their top takeaways in business and life. Hey, Thriving Farmers, Michael Kilpatrick here. So today, joining me on the podcast is Reid, who is a farmer and beekeeper in Southern Oregon. Ruby's parents grew vegetables in the backyard for family use, and caretaking the garden was a family affair, with all members sharing responsibility for cultivating the food. Ruby tended her own small plot and raised rabbits as pets, providing a valuable compost source for the family organic garden. Ruby holds a master's degree in social welfare from Berkeley and a bachelor's degree from Harvard University. As she advanced in her social work and community organizing career, she continued growing organic food simply as a way of life. When the garden started overproducing in 2017, she and her partner Chris Day launched Valhalla Organics to share pickles, preserves, and raw local honey with their community. Welcome to the podcast, Ruby.
Thank you so much for having me, Michael. I really appreciate being able to share our story. And I feel like I'm in really great company with so many of your wonderful guests. So thank you.
Talk to us about your background. I know you grew up with organic gardening and all of that, but what was that one moment where you said, we need to sell this or we need to start a farm?
You know, you mentioned in 2017, we had a backyard garden. My partner and I met while we were hiking on the Pacific Crest Trail. And so we literally walked here to Oregon and fell in love with the Rogue Valley. And we moved here and we started basically a tiny farm in the backyard. We had some chickens, we had vegetables that we were growing. I had a friend who had some goats nearby, so I was making cheese. And we were really just doing that as kind of a life practice, if you will. It wasn't ever intended to be a business. But then the garden started going crazy. So we had like a ton of zucchini and so many cucumbers, lots of jalapenos, and it was way more than we could possibly eat. And so we were just like sneaking zucchini onto people's porches and like going to a friend's house. That's actually a thing? It's a time-tested tradition, right? Like, you know. So we went to our friend's house and we brought a bunch of zucchini, and they still had the zucchini that we gave them the last time. We were like, okay, since we got to do something with this. And I started making pickles and making jams and jellies. We've got a lot of blackberries out back and a plum tree in the front. And so I taught myself how to can and preserve safely. And then even that was more than we were ever going to eat. And so we started giving those away. And here's how you can tell who your real friends are. When you are giving away your hard-earned, you know, produce that you grew and then you pickled and you gave it to them, the people who are your real friends will eventually say to you, you need to be charging money for this. And your real friends, when you say, no, just take it, please take it, they hide money in your car. So that's how Valhalla started, with friends of mine who were like, you really have to stop giving this away. This is like really high quality product. It costs you time and money to make it. You know, this is something that people will want. And so we started going to market, and I was so shocked because we sold out like immediately right away. And it rapidly became clear to me that I could leave my former job and actually do this full time.
So what does a typical day now look for you like on the farm?
Oh, that's such a tough question, Michael. I thought about this a lot because I don't think we have a typical day, and we have 2 locations. So I'm a beekeeper, and we have a 5-acre property in the Klamath Mountains. That's where the bees are. And then we have the mini farm in town in the Rogue Valley. And so, you know, before the coronavirus, we were doing 3, sometimes 4 markets per week. And so, you know, a typical market day for me is I load most of the things into the car the night before, put the product and the samples in the car in the morning, go and set up and do market and come home. Sometimes I've had help with market, so it's not always me. But for the most part, that's kind of a typical market day. In terms of the mini farm, right now we're doing we did kind of a victory garden in the spring. I hadn't entirely intended to plant an early spring garden, but things were looking pretty scary in the world in the beginning of March. And so I think I thought it was important just to have a little bit of extra food in the backyard, not just for us, but also for our community. So I've just harvested a couple of days ago, maybe last week, a whole bunch of radishes out of the backyard and made pickled radishes with them. So there's not really a typical day on the farm or at the market. And then, when I go up to do my beekeeping work, it's almost a 2.5-hour drive to get up there.
Oh, wow.
And typically it's a day trip. So it's a long, long day. I get up there and I do the beekeeping stuff, and sometimes the bees are nice to me and sometimes they're not nice to me, and then I come back down here and do it all again the next day.
All right. So let's talk a little bit about the different units, I guess, as I would call it, of your business. You got the bees, you got the honey from that. Do you sell any other bee products besides honey?
We do. We sell a lip balm that's made from beeswax and organic cocoa butter and coconut oil. It's just like a real simple, clean lip balm. And I started making that, frankly, because I have really sensitive skin and really dry skin. And I needed something for me that was going to work and not have weird chemicals in it. Yeah. And again, it was one of these things where, like, I gave a bunch away to people and they were like, no, these are not freebies. This is like, you need to sell this stuff.
Yeah.
And so we're looking at some other beeswax-based products. And we may in the future start to make bees available to our community, either queens or small nucleus colonies. I don't think that will happen this year, but that really depends on the bees. If they make more queens than what I need, I want to make those available to the community, whether that's giving them away or selling them.
Okay, so you got the bees, then you've got the jams, and that's coming from the blackberries and just other fruit in the area?
Yeah, so we have our own blackberries and plums, and then we work with an incredible local organic farm that does just the most splendid berries that I've ever seen. They're so sweet. They pick them at the absolute peak of freshness. And then typically what I do is I buy them frozen. So Antonio's farm is here locally in Talent, where we are. And they do a whole bunch of different berries, but usually we get strawberries and blueberries from them. We don't grow strawberries. We just don't have enough space to make it reasonable in terms of the yield. And so it's been a really great collaboration for us because, we're both at the markets together when we are at markets. And so it's a good benefit and cross promotion. So for them, they can say, oh, like you can make jam with our stuff, or Ruby sells jam made with our stuff. And for me, I can say, this is made from Antonio's farm, or if you want strawberries that are fresh, just like this jam, you can go right over there and get them. So it's been really nice collaboration.
Okay. All right. So you've got that, and then you've also got the pickles and that sort of aspect. Talk to us about that line.
Yeah. So the pickles, we do a line of different cucumber pickles, some sweet, some savory, some spicy. And then we do pickled vegetables like pickled cauliflower and carrots, or pickled jalapenos. We do a sweet pickled jalapeno that's called cowgirl candy that I can't even eat. I think I die if I smell it, but people love it. They love it so much. I'm a real spice wimp. So that's one of the things that I'm always having to make more of, because the cowgirl flies off the shelf. And our pickles are available in 2 of our local food co-ops. Okay. So that's really exciting. And then we also have pickles and preserves in the Oregon Cheese Cave, which is a really excellent cheese and cheese friends shop in Phoenix, locally owned.
Wow. Very cool. Okay. So then, like, the radish pickles you were making, that was like just going to be a quick pickle because you had just so many radishes.
Exactly. What I figured I would do, back in March, was the fastest food possible. Right. So I did radishes and peas, right? Like cold, hearty, fast food, slow, fast food, I guess. But anyway, so my plan was, if I plant these radishes, in about 5 weeks, I'll have enough to make a few batches of pickled radishes. And so it's a special product. There's a few that are available on our website, but most of them I'm saving for. We have a pickle club. It's like a CSA. Quarterly, you get a goodie box. And when I have something really special, like, our honey, we don't always have a lot of it. We usually don't have a lot of it because it's important to me not to take too much from the bees. or like these pickled radishes, when they're gone, they're gone.
Yeah.
You know, so I'm saving those for our pickle club folks.
Very cool. So as a farmer, there are endless tasks to be done. What systems have you set up to make sure that you're focused on what's the important things every day?
You know, I have a little notebook, and I don't do any kind of like formal structure with it. I don't have like any Pinterest worthy. It's scribbles, literally just scribbles. And the way I manage my to-do list is I completely black out the thing when it's done. And so what I like to see at the end of the day is my little notebook. It's a small notebook. It fits in my pocket.
Yeah.
And so I don't have that many things on each page. I pick the things that are most important. And at the end of the day, I want to see them all blacked out. And if there's something I haven't gotten to from the day before, I just make sure that I do that first thing in the morning the next day. So that's pretty much how I manage it. I have a kind of a very large piece of paper that sits by my desk, you know, like the big sticky note paper, like and that has key goals for each month and like what I should be focused on. So for example, in June, production and bees, and they're seasonal, right? So like production and bees is not my priority in January.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. So what is the bee season out there? What months are they normally like, not hibernating, but in like lockdown, and then what months are they normally flying?
Absolutely. So our apiary is quite at high elevation, so it's cold for a lot of the year. And so the bees will typically start getting active kind of within the colony, usually around February, and the queen will start laying the first workers for the year. But they won't really be flying very much. Since they kind of start going out in March. We have a few sort of early native blooms. Our land backs up to Bureau of Land Management land for 2.3 million acres. And there's a gajillion wildflowers out there. And so they're bringing back something in March, but I'm not entirely sure what it is. But I can see they're going out and they're getting pollen. And then in April, they start to get a lot more active. When you start to get like 50 degrees and more during the day, they're going out. But sometimes they have some difficulty because it's still really cold at night. And so a lot of the plants they're not really blooming because it's so darn cold. And then you get into swarm season, which is when a bee colony is going to replicate itself. They create a whole bunch of new queens, and then the old queen and about half of the colony, sometimes more, sometimes less, will leave with the old queen. And that's where you see like people get really panicked in the springtime that there's like, oh my God, it's a swarm of bees. They're like killer bees. They're coming. They're swarming. They're swirling. Oh God. But mostly swarms are super gentle because they don't have anything to defend. They don't have a home to defend. They don't have babies to defend. They're just looking for their new home. So then they get in a ball and they discuss amongst themselves, and they send out scouts, and they look at different places, and they have this incredible democratic process by which they decide where their new home is going to be, and then they go to it. And so that happens usually like April, May, sometimes into June, sometimes into July. If they keep swarming late in the summer, it's not great because those new queens aren't going to have a good shot at getting mated, and the colony that's left behind doesn't really have a ton of time to set up, nor does the new colony have time to start from scratch. So you want to try to encourage them to swarm early if they're going to do it, and not to do it later.
Yeah, that was going to be my next question, was like why you have the property 2.5 hours away, but I guess that's because it backs up to the Bureau property, correct?
It's so great for bees up there. I mean, I wish that the winter was a little bit less long, but it's not close to any commercial farms. It's not close to really any people. The mosquito truck doesn't even come up our road. So a lot of the threats to bees in terms of pesticides and just them being a nuisance or people being a nuisance to them, we don't have those problems up there. Whereas down in the valley, my first year keeping bees was, I had 2 hives, and I wasn't able to keep them where we live because our property is too small to allow bees to live here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So our talent garden club president let me put my bees in her backyard, which was great.
Oh, very cool.
So they were there in her backyard, and they were doing really well. They had made it over winter. I'd done my first like spring inspection that March, and they were booming. I saw both the queens. They had babies in all stages. Like, they were doing good. And then as I was walking home, there was a guy with a pesticide backpack on spraying the flowers, and like on city property. And this is before our town had implemented an integrated pest management program. So this probably wouldn't happen now, but such is the way. And I could see that literally, like, the bees were going to the flowers, and he was spraying the flowers and the bees, and then they were flying back to my hive. Like, I could see it plain as day. And I was like, please, can you not do this? Like, could you just wait till nighttime if you hadn't? Yeah. And he doesn't have a choice. That's his job. That's how he feeds his family. He cannot say to his boss, some crazy redhead said not to hurt the bees, so I'm not going to do the job that I'm expected to do and paid to do and replaceable, right? So they were dead the next week. Gosh. All of them.
Wow.
All of them. Yep. So I was like, okay, this is not a safe place. This is not a place that I can control the environment at all. And, you know, bees fly for miles. So I can't really control the environment up in Klamath, but I can control it a lot more than down here.
Gotcha. So let's talk about, you know, over the years you've been farming, what would you say has been the hardest thing that you've done over that time?
You know, Michael, I struggled thinking about this question too, because I know I've listened to your podcast, so I know you asked this question. I think there's a lot about it that's really hard. You know, there's just, it's a very, it's a difficult profession to be in because, like I said, we don't actually have that much control, right? Like, Mother Nature is in charge of what happens outdoors, you know, so our livelihood is staked upon this thing that we really can't control. You know, if there's a good, nice, you know, wet winter and there's a good lot of rain in spring, my bees are going to do better, and I'm not in charge of that. You know, so I think one of the things that's been the most difficult is just trying to plan and then having the weather or some other factor come into play. So I have to be really careful planning my trips up to the apiary, because for the bees, there are certain things that have to be done at a certain interval. So, like, I'm supposed to do this thing, and then exactly 10 days later, I'm supposed to do a second step.
Yeah.
But sometimes on day 10, it's snowing up there.
Yeah.
Or it's so nasty on the road that, like, I could probably do it, but, like, is it worth the risk? So there's a lot of just pain points of, I had a plan, and now the weather is different. So I don't think there's a specific instance where I'm like, this is the hardest farming thing I've ever done. I think it's more just like that continual, like, damn it, I made a plan. This rain was not in it, or like this drought was not in it. You know?
Yeah. The variability of it and just the weather aspect. You know, a lot of people say, well, farming is just like every other business. I'm like, yeah, it's a business, but most businesses are not dealing with weather. You know, because if you removed weather from the equation, farming would be so much easier.
Yeah, and like, even when you do it in a greenhouse, you still have to manage, like, how hot is it? How wet is it in there? How mildewy is it in there? Like, just all those things that, like, we can do stuff. We can react, and we can plan, and we can contingency plan, which is one of my success strategies is I always have a backup plan. I'm always like, okay, so when it rains on my bee day, what is my plan? You know, what am I going to do about that? And how bad are the consequences? Because sometimes it's bad to postpone, and sometimes, like, right now, it's supposed to pour rain tomorrow, and I had planned on going and doing a bunch of stuff up there, and the bees aren't going to be okay with that. So I'll do it a different day, and that's not going to be terrible, but it would be better if I could do it as originally planned.
Yeah, absolutely. So who would you say your mentors have been on your farming journey?
Wow. Well, I've learned a lot from a lot of people, and I've been really fortunate to be part of the Oregon Master Beekeeper program. So I've been involved with that for, I think this is year 3. This might be year 4. And the first year, I did online classes, and there was a test, there was all this kind of information. And then the second year, I was matched with a mentor, and actually I got a bonus mentor because they were a couple. They were both mentors, and they were both beekeepers. And so the mentees of those folks would go to their place, and they would demonstrate things, and we would, kind of get to ask them a bunch of questions and whatnot. So I think that's been really valuable. Like, and it's not, it doesn't end when you graduate out of that part of the program, which now I have. So I can still call on them. And, if something's weird in my apiary, or I just don't really know what to do, I've definitely gone to them with questions where I'm like, because bees are really weird. And it seems to me like even when you've worked with them for a lifetime, they are always doing something that you haven't seen before. So I anticipate calling on them quite a bit in the future as well.
That's very cool. Does every state have a program like that? Is that something people should look for locally?
I don't think every single state has them, but definitely a lot of states do. And I know that some of them are virtual. So, you can join in person, but you can also join from other places.
Gotcha.
And the programs vary too. So it's worth looking into, kind of what the requirements are, and if it's really going to be something that you're going to learn and grow as a beekeeper, or something where you're just going to get a certificate and get to say you did a thing. Because to me, I don't care about certificates. I want to be the best beekeeper that I can be. I want to learn everything that I can, because they're complicated and I'm responsible for them. So one thing I would say is just do your research. And if the program in your state is more of a certificate, check off the boxes kind of program, then look at one of the ones that's available online, because you'll learn more. It'll be worth your money. It'll be worth your time.
Because there's a lot of profit that can be made off bees if you do them well.
If you do them well, and if the environment cooperates, and if they don't get poisoned. And that's the trouble now, is that I can be the best beekeeper in the world. They're flying 5 miles. I don't have any control over what they bring home or what they're exposed to out there. I don't,
Yeah. Did you hear that dicambia was just banned in the U.S. today? I think that I just saw the news today.
Oh, I did not see that today.
Yeah, we're recording this early June, and sometimes these don't air for a while after that. But yeah, I know that's not I don't think it's an organic phosphate, which is one of the really bad ones, which I think it was Bayer, or which was having those. But yeah, dicambia was a nasty one just for everything on just so many different levels. I mean, the problem is it volatilized. So you'd spray your field, and then 3 days later it could volatilize out of the field, which means it would lift out of the field on specific air currents and would just travel miles and kill other things. So it was just an absolutely horrible. There was a farmer actually in a couple hours from me that 2 years in a row got hit with that, and it put him out of business. It was heartbreaking. And he had video of the sprayer spraying it. It's really interesting, because a couple months after the spraying happened, or maybe a month after the spraying happened, the guy that was spraying, he mysteriously died.
Oh no.
Yeah, it's when you listen to his entire story, it's heartbreaking, and you're just wondering, what really went on there. So
And there's just so much investment in pretending that those chemicals aren't doing any harm to the environment or to people or to our food or any of that. Like, there's so much invested in being like, oh, the bees must have died from something else. Aren't they having a hard time out there anyway? And you're like, no, they're having a hard time because poison kills you. Like, that's why, And there's a lot of these pesticides too, where like, it's not your like DDT, everything is all dead everywhere in the field. It's not like that. They get neurotoxins, and so then they can't find their way home. And so when you think about it from a colony perspective, right, like I send out the foragers and most of them don't come back, and I still have hungry babies, so I'm sending out more foragers, and the same thing is happening to them, and it just keeps going until all you've got is a handful of nurse bees and a queen and a lot of hungry babies, and that's colony collapse. That's the mystery. Where did the bees go? They just couldn't find their way home because they're exposed to neurotoxins.
Yeah. And of course, it doesn't affect everything the same. So if they're not doing specific studies with bees, it may not show up.
Exactly. Insects are very, very diverse.
Yeah.
They just are.
Yeah. So if there was a magic reset button as it relates to starting your farm, what systems would you go back and put into place sooner?
I would have scaled a lot faster. I wish that I had encountered the farmers market challenge when I was starting out. I took it, I think I was about a year and a half, maybe a year into my business at that point. And I learned a lot of things that I wish I would have known at the beginning. But truly, I think if I had known them at the beginning, I'm not sure I would have even been able to implement them. So things like delegating, or like hiring folks to help with stuff, or like the commercial kitchen. I wish that I would have gotten in there earlier, because we started out just selling farm direct, and now we have the commercial kitchen license, and we're able to, like I said, collaborate with other local farms and buy produce to make stuff with, which we couldn't have done obviously with farm direct. But yeah, being able to spread out in the kitchen and getting some help there with prep, those things really made a huge difference to me. And I think there was sort of a quantum leap moment of realizing that, like a lot of small business owners, we think it's cheaper to just do everything ourselves. But one of the things that I really learned and held on to from the class was that my time is actually really, really valuable, and it should be expensive. And so if there are things that must be done by me, fine, I will do those things. But there's a lot of things that someone else could do equally well or perfectly fine. Like maybe I might do it better, but it doesn't need to be that much. Like what they can do is what I need. And then it frees my time to be able to really think about, where am I going with this business, and what's the next step, and how do I scale this? And, and it gives me an opportunity to even have some reflection time, like what value am I bringing, and to really think about, like, ethics is really important to me in my business, in my farming, in my beekeeping, like in my life. That's important to me. And when I'm just running around doing stuff, I don't really have time to think about what good is this bringing into the world. Like, what am I doing here? And am I like on point with my mission in life? So that's been really helpful, just getting some more help around me and not feeling like I need to do every single thing myself.
So right there, something you said, that time to reflect. I think that time to just, focus on nothing. Because I think in those times when we think on, and it's not that you don't think on nothing, because you just kind of open your mind up to just daydream. I think they say we daydream 30% of our days anyway. But when you really give yourself space for that, and you really just start to really, I think sometimes I'll have a problem, and I'll just, like, out in the shop, because I do a lot of innovation in the shop, and, inventing different things and playing with different things. And I'll just, like, start a project, and I'll have to just walk away. But it's your mind, you're just constantly working on stuff. But I think that point you brought up of just giving yourself the freedom and the space to not have to be busy every single minute of every single day. And I think that was a mistake that I made in my farming career. Obviously, I loved working outside, loved the farm. So 90-hour weeks were, we did those. That's not good for you eventually. And obviously, as we got a mature farm, we were able to cut that drastically, because, again, as the team grew, but allowing that time for self-reflection, allowing that time for just space, I think is so important, because you really start, as you said, you start to think about what you're doing, why you're doing what you're doing, and not just, here's the 20,000 things that I have to get done today.
Yeah, I can get really, really bogged down in my to-do list, like very, I can get very detail oriented. And so I have to remind myself, like, there is a 10,000 foot view that's not checking off boxes, that's looking, like, really critically looking, like, where am I spending money in my business? Where am I making money in my business? Where can I tighten things? And just thinking about scaling up, like, I've been buying jars kind of piecemeal, but what I'd really like to do is get a pallet of jars. So I've been sort of plotting and planning on this. And so it's like, that's kind of my next quantum leap. But if all I'm doing is, like, ordering more jars and jars and jars by the flat, I don't have time to realize that if I were to buy a pallet, I could save myself a lot of time and energy and work, and probably some money. But if I'm just busily checking off boxes, I don't even have time to realize there might be a scaled up solution.
Yeah. And the other thing about the jars is sometimes, because if you order by the pallet, you can order some really cool, innovative, like unique jars. And so you can kind of have your own little really cool. Anyway, I've seen some out there. I had friends that were ordering jars for their yogurt business, and they would order a container load at a time from Europe.
Wow.
Yeah. I'll have to see if I can find a picture and send it to you. It's really cute, the little jars they used to use. And they were such a unique item, and they sold them like hotcakes. So.
Oh, I bet. I love a jar. Like, I'm a really big fan of jars, as you can imagine, because I have a lot of them in my life. But I'm like a fan of like the special jar, the cute jar, So I'll look forward to seeing those.
Very cool. With that, I'd like to stop here and take a quick break. In a minute, we'll be back with Ruby. If you've been enjoying this episode so far, you're going to want to head over to growingfarmers.com/free resources and download our free resource bundle to help you shave hours off your week and become a thriving farmer. It includes resources such as our 10 winter growing secrets we wish we knew when we started, which is a ebook which talks about the tips and techniques to get better growth in your winter production. We teach things like the simple but counterintuitive principle that trips up most beginning growers, the shape and size of tunnels that are best for winter production, how to prepare beds so they are weed-free and get beautiful, lush stands of crops, what to do about pests like aphids, voles, and slugs, how to fast-track your research to fine-tune your production for your microclimate, and how to pack in more crops for higher yields and profits. So head over to growingfarmers.com/free resources and download your free resource bundle today. All right, thriving farmers, we are back with Ruby. Ruby, talk to us about, you farm with your partner, Chris. Talk to us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so Chris and I think, are a really good team. We have skills that are very complementary. And so the way that we divide up responsibilities is pretty much based on who's going to be best at doing that thing or who hates that thing the least.
Okay.
So a couple of examples. Chris is allergic to bees, so he does not do any beekeeping.
Okay.
Yes, he's very brave. So he stays up on the property, and so he does a lot of the like infrastructure management, right? So like making sure that we have, the water tanks are full and the generator is working, the solar panels and the solar system is working. He does pretty much all of the infrastructure stuff. Including like technology. We just got a booster up there, so I'm really hoping that that's going to drastically improve communications. So that's an example of something where like, yeah, I could have maybe figured that out and put it together, but he's going to be really good at that, and then I do like the financials and the accounting because it's something, he could do it, but I'm really good at that and I don't mind doing it. I hate it less. And so that's kind of our metric is like, who's going to be best at this and who hates it the least for tasks that aren't that fun. Another example is Chris is afraid of almost nothing in the world, but he does not like heights. And so we had to redo the roof on the outhouse, which is not a tall structure. I mean, it's not. But he was like, oh no, I'm not. And so I learned roofing. I looked at YouTube a whole lot.
Okay.
And so I climbed up on the roof and we worked together, and he kind of gave me some direction and some help from the ground. So we just really try to figure out what's going to work the best. I'm kind of a small person and he's a big, strong person. Yeah. And so oftentimes, like, when we're like carrying something heavy together, I can help, but he's definitely taking on the brunt of it. And then I do all of the sales and marketing. And he helps out with that, if I need it. If I'm doing like a big Christmas show that's 3 days long, he'll come and help me, or he'll come and drop me off, or he'll bring more product if I run out. But that's kind of my wheelhouse.
Very cool. So one challenge many farms face is finding and hiring people for the team. And I know you talked earlier how you've added some people for some of your sales and such. Talk to us a little bit about that. Yeah,
so this won't work for all people, but my success has really been in working with people that I know and trust already. So the person that helped me with markets and a little bit in the kitchen as well last year was someone that I met through my nonprofit work. And she's really smart, and I thought she'd be really good in engaging with the people. And then when she started helping out for probably a month, I was there with her either all of the time or most of the time. And I kind of did a gradually stepping back where, like, you know, by the end of that month, I really was, you know, showing up in the morning, making sure everything looked okay, you know, coming back to give her a break in the middle of the day, and, you know, was very hands off. But, you know, it took a couple of weeks of working with her, especially because, you know, by that point I had actually crafted good, solid messaging that I learned through the course. And so I wanted to make sure that, you know, not only was she just kind of generally doing a good job, but I wanted her to be delivering the message that I worked so hard to craft. So some of the success, I think, came from knowing her. And then I've also had a lot of really wonderful, like, volunteer and trade help. People really like my product and they believe in what we're doing. And so I've had a friend who's come to the kitchen and done dishes for me at the end of the day. And I give her some pickles or jam, like, I'll just, you know, and that's been really, really wonderful because, you know, margins are tight, and, you know, this is a friend and I like to share stuff with friends anyway. And, you know, so to me, it's been really like a community and relationship building experience, bringing people in to help.
Well, I think I wanted to point out something there too. Like you talked earlier about, you don't have to do everything. You need to focus on what you do well as a farmer. And, you know, just that dishes aspect, because you can do dishes. You're probably great at dishes, but at the end of a long day, you just need to be able to step back. And I'm sure there's a whole bunch of other things that you have to do to wrap up from that day anyway, that having someone come in and be able to help with dishes is just a load off your back.
It is so, so nice because like, I can do the dishes, but then I'm there for a really long time. And, you know, it's just, you're tired. Like, at the end of a long day in the kitchen, especially with canning, it's hot. Like, it's boiling water for hours and hours and hours and hours in there, and it's hot, and you're tired. So just having somebody show up and have your back, it's just like it's almost like the emotional boost of that is worth more than the dish doing.
Yeah. Well, I think a lot of business and a lot of running a farm is the emotional side, and that's it's managing that expectation. You know, right now my wife and I are going through the process of attempting to buy a new property, and there's, you know, like one of the things she said recently, Michael, I'm starting to get emotionally invested in this because this property was never a sure bet from the beginning because all the hoops we're having to jump through. And, you know, if we end up getting it and going through, we will obviously be sharing a lot of that in a bunch of different podcast episodes. But, you know, it is a roller coaster. I mean, just with, you know, talking about this property and working to acquire it, there's a roller coaster. And then, you know, once you start investing your time and effort into that with building out a business on top of it is a whole nother level. Let's talk a little bit about your marketing. You talked about farmers markets. You told about the different co-ops and actually now at a store. Why do you focus on those outlets?
Oh, that's a great question. Yeah, so we have, you know, we have online sales, we have the co-ops, and we have the markets. And before COVID-19, my business plan for this year was to really increase our wholesale to retail and our online sales. And so one of the things that happened, you know, with the crisis was that plan went into overdrive, you know, because our markets are currently happening. But I feel like for me, excuse me, I feel like for me, it's important to stay home as much as I can and continue to serve my community. But I'm just not feeling safe being in the market space. Our customers have been really wonderful, and a lot of the market customers in general have been really supportive and really safe, wearing masks, you know, respecting distance. But some of them really haven't been. They've been mean to market vendors, and it's just not a scenario that I want to put myself in right now. But we've been really successful at getting very recently into both of our local food co-ops. We're lucky in this valley. We have the Ashland Food Co-op and we have the Medford Food Co-op. and, they're providing really good local food to our communities. And especially right now where there's a lot of problems and confusion and difficulty in, the big ag food production world. I think folks are looking even more to local solutions. And so we're really excited to partner with the co-ops around that. And then we do online orders, so people can order online and we ship. And then I do deliveries once every 2 weeks. So every other Monday, I go out locally here in the Rogue Valley and we do no contact, very safe, gloves, mask, etc. And that's been really successful. I'm not going to say we haven't taken a hit because of this, but, we're still in the game. We're going to survive. We're going to be okay. We have a plan.
Yeah, absolutely. So you actually found us last year through our Farmers Market Challenge. Talk to us a little bit about the experience of going through that.
Sure. Yeah. So I saw a very well-placed Facebook ad, and now I know that is Michael's doing. So I was perfectly targeted, and it was exactly what I needed. And it basically was like, hey, you want to up your game? Here's this free thing. It'll take you like 10 minutes every day for 3 days, and then you can try it out in real life. And if it works, super. And I was like, okay, if it works, super. It's free,
Yeah.
And so I did the challenge, and I took it really seriously. Like I watched the first video and I was like, oh, these are really good ideas. I'm going to try them. And so the first thing that I tried was hot corners. I'd been putting some weird stuff on the corners of my table that just didn't look very good. And it was like I'd put my email list there and like no one was signing up for it. It was not working. And so I tried putting a whole bunch of jars of pickles, I think, on a corner, and I made it a little vertical. And I made like $200 more than I would have at, like more than a normal market. And that's all, that was the only thing I'd changed. And I was like, okay, these guys are on to something. Like what's in the second video, And so then I started using Just So You Know. So like, just so you know, I make these all by hand, or just so you know, these are locally grown, or just so you know, it's 2 for $15 if you get a second one, whatever.
Yeah.
And that was amazing. And the same thing happened. Like I was making twice at market what I expected to make. And it kind of kept increasing. Like the more things that I added, the better it got. So like you guys said, hey, make it really clear what your prices are. So people don't feel uncomfortable because they don't want to ask how much does this cost and then feel weird about it. And I was like, I had a price list, but it was really confusing for people to figure out how much it was. And then I have lots of different products and lots of different sizes. And so what was happening was so awkward. They would come and they'd be like, I'm going to buy this jar. And I'd be like, that's $12. And they'd be like, wait, no, it's supposed to be $8. And I'm like, no, that's the large. So it's 12.
Yeah.
And then it's so awkward because you're like, do you want the smaller one or do you want to give me more money than you planned? That was terrible. And that stopped happening entirely when I just I use those little, like an index card size plastic little holder. And I just put pickled beets, small, this much, large, this much. It's right next to the beets. They know how much it is. They know which one to grab. Like that solved so many of the awkwardness problems for me. And then I also learned how to respond to people when they said, that's too much money, and I didn't have a good response for that before. I think I actually learned that in the paid class, and it's all blurring together, the brilliant things that I've learned from you guys. But I started feeling really confident being like, we base our prices on quality. And yeah, you can get a cheaper pickle, but you can't get a better one. Like try a sample and let me know what you think. I feel totally confident saying that now. Whereas before I'd be like, oh, yes, I'm terrible and I'm gouging you and I'm a capitalist pig and I should probably just go home. Like I don't have that feeling anymore.
Yeah. So you joined the class, and what has that done to your sales since then, or just done? I mean, obviously it sounds like it's given you more confidence. It's actually increased your sales. Just talk to us about, after you went through the class, how that helped your farm.
I mean, it changed things in so many ways. like visually, the way that I set up my booth looks so much better and more professional. And I think it's a huge piece of why fewer people are even saying to me, this is too much money, because the way I have it set up now, they can tell this is something someone cares about. This is something someone put time into. This is special, right? Like my setup says, this is special. You know, this is something that you want to care about and do, people care about. So that was huge. I also learned that I need to make it more clear to people what I have and how they can get it. So I was really active on Facebook. I had lots of like really cool conversations and posting videos and teaching people stuff. Like people are engaging, they're like excited, but I wasn't actually posting, hey guys, here's our website where you can buy stuff. I was posting like, I'll be at market today, but I wasn't making it really easy for people to figure out how to get this stuff or even what I had. And so one of the things that I've been doing is, and I think this is since the class, about a third of my posts now tell people what they can get from us and where they can find it. And I felt kind of like, oh, that's going to feel real salesy. And like, what if people don't like that? But they love it. They're like, oh, I've been meaning to buy from you. Here's the link. Sweet.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's been a really big change, just like that it's not bad to tell people how they can get your stuff. It's actually really important and they want that.
Because you're changing lives with the high quality food that you have. And you need to let people know about it.
Yeah, and they want to know about it. Exactly. Yeah.
Recently, you came out pretty strongly about the BML movement and then addressed racial equality on your page. And then you posted in our group and that caused a commotion. Talk to us about that, because I know there's a lot of people who I feel they feel bad talking about it, because in one aspect it may make them feel like they haven't addressed it before and it's wrong that they didn't address it before. Talk to us about why it's important to just talk about it.
Sure, Michael, and thank you so much for asking me this question. I've been really deeply involved in fighting for racial justice since I was very, very young. The first time that I was in the streets protesting the murder of a Black man by police officers was in 1999. His name was Amadou Diallo, and things have not gotten better. People are still being killed by vigilantes and police, and it isn't getting better. So it's important for people, especially white people, to stand up and say, this is not okay. To say Black lives matter, and I'm going to put myself on the line, because every single person's life has value, and we need to treat Black people with the same value that we would treat our own family, and so I think about all of the companies that sent out emails about the coronavirus. It kind of became a joke, right? Like everybody's talking about it. And right now, that needs to be happening. Every company, every person, like when you don't take a stand, that silence is complicity with oppression. And so it's really important not just to be like, oh, I'm not racist, I'm not in the KKK, I don't, discriminate against Black people or whatever. Like that's not enough. That's good. That's the minimum bar. But we have to do better. We have to be actively anti-racist. We have to be having hard conversations with other white people and bringing them forward for justice.
Because I think it's something that so many people would love to ignore, love to think that it's not actually a problem. Because if you actually address that it's a problem, then it actually means you have to do something about it. And so many Americans are so busy with their lives, they don't want to think that there's a problem that they have to do something about. But there is. Yeah. I mean, I think that's the most difficult thing, is that many people do not want to confront a problem that does not cause them personal harm, right? So if racism and police brutality are not things that we personally fear ourselves as white people, we are very inclined to want to say that's not happening, or it's not real, or it's not that bad, or something else is worse. But
that's not true. People are literally being murdered in the street, and white people are more angry that Target is getting looted. That's not okay. That's not human. That's not who we are.
Yeah. I mean, my wife and I were talking about, we live in Germantown, which is a little tiny town off of Dayton. And there's a lot of things going on in Dayton, but I mean, obviously in our town, you wouldn't know the difference. And so we were just talking about how we're so insulated from it. That, I mean, if we didn't look at the news, we wouldn't know anything was going on. And just how that it's, you know, and my background is I've hired a lot of different people over. So we've had all sorts of people working for us. When I worked in the plant, we worked with all sorts of different people. And, you know, I went out to lunch with a lot of them and we had a great time, but that's just, again, as you think what you said, that's the lowest common denominator right there, that you can treat them, you know, just like other people. The other aspect is when they're not thriving. And I think this is the Thriving Farmer podcast. You know, I will never really understand what they're going through in their own communities because I'm not in their communities with them. I see them for a very short period of time. And when we're in a very professional and different environment. So just working with them, I don't understand what they're going through. And so I won't be able to have that conversation. And so a lot of what I need to be doing right now is just listening. And it's tough. I think it's tough because again, I see the images in the street and it just hurts on so many levels. And I don't want my kids to be in a nation that still goes on, but it is. And so I think that's another reason is we want to ignore it because we don't want to have to talk to our kids and the family about it, but it needs to be brought to light. And
it does. And that's the crux of it really, is that ignoring it is why we still have this problem. And white parents not talking to white kids about racism is how we get grown-ups that really are scary or that are just not willing to stand up or not willing to even see it. Like, I think it's a real privilege as a white person to learn about racism as opposed to experiencing it ourselves personally. And I think because it is a choice for us, we get to decide if we're going to see this or not. The only ethical choice we can make is decide to see it. And I think what you said about listening to Black people and Indigenous people, people of the global majority, listening is important and crucial, but you have to listen and you have to believe. So when somebody says, this was racist, you don't say, no, it wasn't. You don't say, but what about this? You don't say anything other than, let me learn about that. And if they're saying that what you did or said was racist, listen so hard and take responsibility. Don't say, well, but I didn't mean it that way.
Yeah.
You know, don't say, my other Black friend said that was okay. You say, I am so sorry. I made a mistake. I am going to do better. You know, and you find out, where did it hurt? Why did it hurt? And know that it doesn't matter that you feel embarrassed. Like, when someone calls me out on something, I feel real shitty. Yeah. But I don't put that on them. I say, let me learn. I messed up here, and it's my job to do better.
Absolutely. And, you know, one of the things my wife and I were talking about is, you know, the victors always write history. And that's an incredibly scary thing because, you know, just recently, some of the atrocities that happened in our history were, you know, I read about them and I was like, are you serious? That actually happened? And it's unfortunate that it takes something like this for that stuff to, you know, again, I wasn't particularly bright in school. So I didn't really read all the way through my history book, but I don't even think that was a page in my history book, some of the things that they talk about. And I think because it was, they're embarrassed about it. They want to hide that, but that can't be hidden because it has repercussions that reach even to today.
Exactly. And if we don't critically look at our history, then we just keep doing the same dumb shit. Sorry, I don't know if I'm allowed to say that on your podcast, but we start doing bad things.
Yes.
When we don't look at what we've done.
Yeah, absolutely. So talk about the repercussions from that, because I know you were quite vocal on your page. What did your customers say about that?
You know, our customers were really awesome. I think we probably lost some white supremacists. And just so folks who are listening have context, I posted a story about a white supremacist who came to my market booth last summer and tried to recruit me. Really like explicitly, proudly tried to recruit me. And I very vocally shut him down and eventually told him, these pickles are not for you. Please leave immediately. So I wrote a blog post saying, dear white supremacists, these pickles are not for you. So it's a very bold statement. And it's making a bold statement in a place where, you know, the next town over was the West Coast headquarters for the KKK. We have a lot of very angry, confused, and armed white people. We've had a couple of white folks waving guns at protesters. We've had a couple of white folks running people over with their trucks. So it's definitely, it's a community that has a ton of wonderful progressive people too. You know, it's not just like, you know, crosses burning on everybody's lawn. It's not, you know, but I really don't know what proportion of my customers subscribe to that philosophy. And I also don't know how many of them wouldn't say they necessarily are white supremacists, but would be offended enough by the concept that Black Lives Matter to no longer want to purchase from me. And my thought on that is, I don't want your money anyway. That feels really disgusting to me, and you don't deserve the pickles. So you don't, that's not for you, you know? And so they can self-select out. And that's kind of a big piece of why I put it out there, is that if I, for example, on the way to our land, there's a gas station, and at the gas station, there are some really hideous signs that I'm not going to say what they say, but I don't agree with them. And so we never buy gas there. I would rather run out of gas than buy gas there. And so they've allowed me to self-select, right? And I, you know, I'm doing that for my customers. I'm like, here's where we're at. If you're with us, awesome. If not, sayonara. We don't want you anyway. And people have been really positive. I actually had a couple of folks order pickles just because they thought what we did was right. Yeah.
And again, this is not what this is about, but I do want people to realize that this is you mobilizing your tribe and telling them what you believe and attracting those people to you that believe what you believe. So it's helping you connect even further with those right type of customers for you, and getting them super excited about your brand and to help you bring more pickles to other people. So it's a great, it's you know, it's taking that stand in for what you believe and sharing that with the world. Because, you know, business is business, and it's great that we make money at it. But I think every single one of us is in business because we also want to have an impact in this world. And this is that platform which allows you to have your impact.
Absolutely. And we've spent years building relationships with like our Facebook following and our email subscribers. And so they care what we have to say. So when we say something that is important, I think they might listen. And that is, like, to me, that is my responsibility. Like, if I have an audience and there is something that needs to be said, I need to be brave and say that thing, because they want to know. Like, people don't know what to say. They don't know what to do. They don't know how to help. And like you said before, people are afraid, like, well, is it going to look weird that I didn't say anything before? And like, yeah, it sucks. Yesterday, 20 years ago, 40, 50, 400 years ago, those would have been great times to take action. But you know what? All we have is today. So do it today. If you don't know what to say, type Black Lives Matter, period.
So let's talk about promotion. We kind of like gone through a little bit of that. You've been at farmers markets, you get it on Facebook. Is there anything else that you found works particularly well for you? You know, we have a really active email list, and I don't email a lot, but I try to email things that are of value. So we have, you know, a bunch of educational blog posts, and I'll send those out through email. And I obviously let people know how they can get the stuff and whatnot. But even that changed after the course, because I realized, like, even in my emails, I would be like, why isn't anybody buying stuff when I send an email? Oh, because you didn't put the link to the website in there. That could be why, right? Because you didn't highlight any of your products in there. Oh, that's probably it. And so when I started doing that, now, you know, when I send an email, there's usually, you know, an hour or so of like a few orders coming in, and then, you know, it peters off through the next day. But I know that it's working, right? Because I can send an email
And then I can look back at the metrics and see that the pattern of when my sales happen is now no longer market days, it's email days. And it's the days when I post on Facebook, or, I'll share our Facebook posts. So we have a bunch of really active local Facebook groups for each of there's kind of 4 main towns in our valley. And so the days when I share those posts in those groups, I get a lot of sales. And when I first started doing that, I was really nervous because I'm active in those groups just as a community member. And I was like, oh, are they going to feel like I'm just like pouncing on them to sell them my pickles, But people have been so grateful. They're like, oh, like definitely let us know next time you're going out. Like, because we only do deliveries every 2 weeks. And so there's sort of like a push around the lead up to the deliveries. So usually there's less sales in the off week because there's not that feeling of urgency. Like Ruby's coming to my house on Monday, I better order.
Yeah.
So there's kind of a flow to it where like the off week, I'm doing more engagement and education, outreach, and, pictures of the garden and that kind of stuff. And then on the delivery week, it's more like, here's what we have, here's what we're running out of. We only have 2 left of this. So if you want them, get them,
So your farm is CNG certified too. Talk about that.
Yeah. So certified naturally grown is the grassroots alternative to organic certification. And we did initially intend to do organic certification and rapidly discovered that it is not designed for small farms, nor is it affordable for small farms. We had the worst experience. It was unbelievably bad. I don't even really want to get into the details. And then someone let me know about certified naturally grown. And I looked into them, and they follow the National Organic Program, except they have higher standards for some things like livestock. And the organic program is getting really dumbed down in terms of how you can abuse your animals. And certified naturally grown is a higher standard for those things. And certified naturally grown actually certifies apiaries, so bees and beehives and honey. The National Organic Program does not. Okay, so when you're in the store and you see the organic honey, that comes from another country and is certified organic in another country. So you can have local honey or you can have organic honey, but you can't have both. Yeah, so I wanted something that says we treat these bees well. Like, I want something to be on the jar that tells the consumer I'm not hurting these animals. I'm treating them ethically, with respect, and organically. So certified naturally grown has, they do produce, livestock, mushrooms, aquaponics, and apiary certifications. And it's farmer to farmer. So it's not like there's some bureaucratic high muckety muck who's going to come to your farm with a clipboard and check off a bunch of boxes and not know anything about farming, which is what happens with the organic program. You're going to have a farmer who grows the same kind of crop as you or raises the same kind of animal as you, also a beekeeper or whatever, come and do the inspection. And for me, it was so valuable. Like both the times I've done inspections and the times I've been inspected, I always learn something. So when we used to have chickens, the guy who came to inspect, he obviously also had chickens and had them here. And there was a hawk that flew overhead while he happened to be here. And he was able to identify the hawk and give me suggestions on things that he'd done to protect his birds. So a bureaucrat can't give you that.
Yeah. The bureaucrat's going to check off some boxes.
Yeah, they're going to be like, dangerous predator. But this guy was helpful,
Now being a farmer for a few years, what do you feel is the biggest mistake that you see beginning farmers making?
They're trying to do too many things. I made this mistake too. So yeah, and every single one of them is doing it. I actually just had a friend I talked to a couple of days ago, and they've been running a farm for a while, but now they want to actually like do more markets and whatnot. And she had like a laundry list of like, I don't even know how many, like 30 different products. And then she's like, and then I'm going to make this, and I'm going to make this, and I'm going to make this. And I think we're going to do a vinegar, and we're going to do a pickles, and we're going to, how fast can it, like if it's Saturday, if I make the pickles now, And I paused for like a tiny bit of breath and was like, so what all other products do you think I should have?
Wow.
And I was like, okay, let's walk this back right now. I
Yeah.
think you need to stop making anything. You have plenty of stuff. Because what I learned is that people who come to your booth and it's not immediately clear what your stuff is, they just leave. Like they get analysis paralysis and they're like, I'm out. You know, so when I first started at market, I had the jams and jellies, and I had some produce, and I had worm compost, and I had laundry soap, homemade laundry soap. So you know that was very confusing to people because some of it is food and some of it is not food and some of it is soap and all of it's in jars. So very confusing and disorienting for the customer. So I really encouraged her to just stop making new stuff, make more of the things that she already had, and then see what sells and stop making the stuff that doesn't sell and make a lot of the stuff that does. And I was like, you're just going to have to kind of market test this. So like, you know, maybe pick a smaller set of a combination of things to bring with you. So you have 20 products, I'm going to bring 5 to this market, you know? And I also said, I thought signage would help with that. You know, like if on the sign it says produce, jams, pickles, then it makes your mind a little less confused because there's words there that you can be like, oh, okay, I get what these things are. You know, so yeah, I think new farmers are trying to grow too much. They're trying to do too much, and they think they need to have like 100 different products when actually they just need a couple of good ones.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think I see some farmers with that trying to do too much. I think I've seen a couple good scenarios where they've split a booth in half. Like if they're doing meat, they focus meat in like one half, and then they focus the vegetables in another half, and like really split it down the middle. But if you're trying to do, you know, pickles and vegetables and meat and flowers and laundry soap and, you know, all that stuff, you're not going to be able to do any of them well. And quality is what sells. For small local farms, quality is what's going to sell. And you need to focus on quality 100%. So yeah, absolutely agree with you on that.
Yeah, we kind of do that booth split thing too, even though like now my stuff is just pickles and jam. I do half the table is pickles and half the table is jam. Or sometimes if I have a lot of pickles and it's going to take up more than half the table, I do like sweet versus savory. So most of the pickles are on one side, but the sweet pickles are with the jams and jellies. And that really seems to work. Because again, I think it's like people compartmentalize in their mind. And so if they look at the booth and all they see is pickles and they don't like pickles, they're going to think, okay, let me just move. But because I have a big display with the jam, their eye doesn't necessarily just go away from they're like, oh, what is that little stuff that's, you know. So I think that does actually really help keeping them on one side of the table and the other side of the table.
What encouragement would you go back and give your new farmer self?
Oh, I would say don't be so mean to yourself. I'm like a big fan of like going over things that I've done wrong in the past and being like, that was terrible, you know. So I would say just be gentle to yourself. You know, beekeeping is really hard. It is really hard to keep them alive. They are mean and scary, and you know, like you make mistakes and you question yourself all the time, all the time. So I would definitely let myself know I should be a little more gentle on myself. And I think I would also, and I do this now when people ask me about beekeeping, I say like, are you ready to break your heart? Because beekeeping will break your heart. Like it is so hard and so painful, and you feel so responsible for these beings that you can't really totally even understand what's going on with them a lot of the time. You know, so there's like an emotional aspect to caretaking these animals that is very unique. You know, they're not like any other kind of livestock. And they have unique dangers and unique threats that they are under, you know. So I think I would say to myself, this is going to be harder than you think it's going to be, and you need to be nicer to yourself when you fuck it up. When you mess it up.
And start slow too. I think what you're saying too is just, you know, make sure you don't dive in too fast, because that you can sink lots of money in fast and be very over your head.
Definitely.
If you could pick one, what would be your favorite farming tool?
Well, it's going to be so boring if anybody's a beekeeper, but there's something called a hive tool, and I have one that's really cool and special. So normally it's a metal tool, kind of one edge is flat and the other edge is usually either a J-hook or like like a curved, an L-shaped curve. So mine has all 3 of those on it, and it is so awesome because you can use a little J-hook for grabbing the frames and kind of picking them up so you can get to them. But then it's got the other 2, the flat side and the part you can use as a winch. And it's got a little hole in it so you can hang it on a nail. It's pretty spectacular. If you're a beekeeper, look for that one that has the L top and the J top.
Okay. All right. Do you believe that now is the best time to start a farm?
Oh, I think it's always a good time to start a farm. Even with a global pandemic and everything being crazy, especially, like food security is going to continue to be an issue. I think it's very clear and becoming rapidly more clear that our large industrial food system is failing us. And when there is even a tiny hiccup in it, it falls on its face. So, yeah, I would encourage people to start farms. I would definitely encourage you to start your farm with significant savings because farming is horrifyingly expensive and buying property is horrifyingly expensive. And usually it takes longer than you think it's going to take to start making money. So I would say yes, but a qualified yes, assuming that you've got a good amount of money in savings that you can fall back on or that you can depend on until your farm becomes profitable.
Where can people find out more about you and your work?
We have a website, valhallaorganics.org. That's VALHALLA organics.org. And we're also on Facebook at Valhalla Organics. We're on Instagram and Twitter, but we're not as active there. So I would say if you're looking to connect with us, Facebook and our website are probably the best places to do that.
And we'll put all that in the show notes as well. Well, Ruby, thank you so much for your time today. It's always great chatting with you. And it's always just learning about the different types of farms that all our farmers run is so exciting. So again, thank you and best of luck to you in this year.
Thank you so much, Michael. I really, really enjoyed our conversation. I so appreciate being invited to be part of this with you. Thank you.
Hey, Thriving Farmers. Next week on the podcast, we will have Greg Peterson join us. Now, Greg Peterson runs the Urban Farm podcast. He runs the urbanfarm.org, and it's a fascinating interview. Greg is so passionate about what he does, which is educating people how to farm in their backyards. We talk about permaculture. We talk about how important it is in his desert farming environment. We dive deep into how he has a fruit tree program in the Arizona area. They sell between 4,500 and 5,500 fruit trees and have like a less than a 1% failure rate with the plants taking just because of the program that he teaches around that. So he shares that in the podcast. We talk about his favorite farming tools, favorite books, and he actually recommended some great guests as well, which we'll need to get in touch with and schedule for here. So I can't wait to share with you next week. Greg Peterson, it's a great informational podcast episode. So there you have it, another episode in the books. So I'd love if you would hop on over to iTunes and leave us a rating and a review. Those mean everything to us. We love to hear what you're thinking. If you have a podcast guest that you can recommend, please pop on over to the Thriving Farmer Podcast website and leave us a review. That's thrivingfarmerpodcast.com.